She didn't know that the man watching her deliver her practiced rejection speech was the most powerful alpha in the Northern Territory. She didn't know that he'd been tracking her scent through 3 city blocks, his wolf already restless with recognition. And she certainly didn't know that her declaration of "I don't do relationships" would amuse him enough to cross the crowded networking event and claim her as his mate before the night was over. "I appreciate the invitation, David, but I need to be clear about something." Claire adjusted her blazer, the familiar armour of professional detachment settling over her shoulders like a shield. The hotel ballroom buzzed with corporate small talk and clinking champagne glasses, but her focus remained laser-sharp on the earnest marketing director in front of her. "I don't do relationships, not casual ones, not serious ones, not any kind. My career is my priority, and I don't have time for complications." David's face fell, but she'd perfected this speech over 3 years. Clean, professional, final. "I understand you're focused on work," David tried again, "but maybe just dinner sometime? Nothing serious." "Nothing is what I'm looking for." The words came out sharper than she intended. She softened her voice, adding the practiced kindness that made the rejection easier to swallow. "You're a good man, David. You deserve someone who can give you what you're looking for. That's not me." She turned away before he could respond, already scanning for the nearest exit. These corporate mixers were necessary evils for her consulting business, but the inevitable personal conversations always left her feeling exposed, raw, like someone had stripped away her carefully constructed walls and found the scared woman underneath. That's when she felt it, the sensation of being watched, studied, evaluated. Heat crawled up the back of her neck, and something in her chest pulled tight. Dangerous. Every instinct she'd developed over years of protecting herself screamed at her to run. Instead, she found herself turning around. He stood across the room like he owned it, owned everything in it. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than her rent. Dark hair, storm-grey eyes, and a presence that made every other man in the room fade into background noise. He wasn't looking at the woman trying to get his attention, wasn't engaging with the group of executives clearly hoping to network with him. He was looking at her. Their eyes met across 30 feet of crowded space, and Claire's breath caught. Something impossible shot through her chest, golden and warm and terrifying, like recognition, like coming home, like every romance novel she'd thrown away in disgust because real life didn't work that way. Her blood went cold. This was exactly the kind of complication she'd spent 3 years avoiding. She spun toward the exit, heels clicking against marble as she wove between clusters of networking professionals. The hotel lobby stretched ahead, freedom just 20 steps away. She'd learned long ago that the best way to handle attraction was to remove herself from the situation entirely. No conversations, no opportunities for disappointment, no chance for someone to leave when they discovered she wasn't worth staying for. "Leaving so soon?" The voice stopped her cold. Deep, rough, with an undertone of amusement that made her spine straighten. She didn't need to turn around to know who it was. The heat radiating from behind her, the way her pulse kicked up despite every logical thought telling her to keep walking. Her body had already betrayed her. Claire turned slowly, chin lifted in the defiance that had carried her through 1,000 difficult situations. "The evening's finished for me. Interesting." He stepped closer, not crowding, but definitely claiming space. Up close, he was even more devastating. The kind of handsome that made smart women do stupid things. "I heard your conversation with David. Very thorough rejection." Heat flashed through her cheeks. "You were eavesdropping?" "Hard not to overhear when you're delivering your speech loudly enough for half the room." His mouth curved into something that might have been a smile if it hadn't been so predatory. "Do you use that exact script every time, or do you customize it based on the poor bastard asking?" The casual cruelty of the observation hit like a slap. "Excuse me? The 'I don't do relationships' line, very efficient, probably saves you a lot of time." He tilted his head, studying her like a puzzle he intended to solve. "But I have to ask, what made you so afraid of trying?" "I'm not afraid." The lie came automatically, but something in his grey eyes said he saw right through it. "I'm focused. There's a difference." "Is there?" He moved another step closer, and Claire caught his scent. Something wild and clean, like pine forests and winter storms. It made her want to step closer instead of backing away, which was absolutely the wrong response. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you're running." "I don't run." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I make smart choices." "Smart choices." He repeated the words like he was tasting them. "And avoiding relationships entirely is smart because people leave, because promises get broken, because she'd learned at 12 that love was conditional, and she'd spent the next 15 years proving she wasn't worth the conditions. But she wasn't about to share her damage with a stranger, no matter how her pulse responded to his presence. "Because I know what I want," she said instead, "and it doesn't include complications." "Complications?" The word seemed to amuse him. "Is that what you call this?" "This?" He gestured between them, a small movement that somehow encompassed the tension crackling in the air, the way she couldn't quite catch her breath, the impossible pull she felt toward a man she'd known for less than 5 minutes. "This feeling that you're trying so hard to ignore." Claire's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't know what you're talking about." "No?" He stepped closer again, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his grey eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Then why are you still here? If relationships are such a waste of time, why aren't you walking away?" Because she couldn't. Because every rational thought in her head was being drowned out by something deeper, something that recognized him in ways that made no logical sense. Because when he looked at her like that, like she was exactly what he'd been searching for, 3 years of careful walls started crumbling, which was exactly why she needed to leave, now. "This conversation is over." She turned toward the exit again, forcing herself to take steady steps despite the way her hands were shaking. "Claire." She stopped. She hadn't told him her name. She was certain she hadn't told him her name. "How do you— I know a lot of things about you." His voice was closer now, like he'd followed her retreat. "I know you've been running from something for years. I know you're stronger than you think you are, and I know that speech you just gave. It's bullshit." She whirled around, anger finally cutting through the confusion. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're terrified." His grey eyes held hers steadily, no judgment in them, only certainty. "I know someone hurt you badly enough that you'd rather be alone than risk it happening again. And I know that despite every wall you've built, you felt it too." "Felt what?" "The recognition." He said it like a confession. "The pull, the sense that you've been waiting for me, without knowing what you were waiting for." Claire's breath caught, because that's exactly what it felt like he was the answer to a question she'd never been brave enough to ask, which was insane. She didn't believe in love at first sight or soulmates or any of the fairy tale nonsense that left women broken when reality set in. She believed in independence, self-reliance, and the kind of strength that came from never needing anyone else. "You're wrong," she whispered. Am I?" He smiled then, and it transformed his entire face from intimidating to devastating. "Tell me you didn't feel it the moment our eyes met. Tell me you're not fighting every instinct right now that's telling you to stay. Tell me this is just another conversation with another man you're planning to reject with your practice speech." She couldn't, because everything he'd said was true, and they both knew it. "It doesn't matter what I feel." Her voice came out stronger than she expected. "I meant what I said. I don't do relationships. I don't get involved. I don't—" "Good." The single word cut through her speech like a blade. "Because neither do I." Claire blinked, thrown off balance by the unexpected response. "What?" His smile widened, predatory and amused and absolutely confident. "I said good. I don't do relationships either." He stepped closer, And this time she didn't step back. Couldn't step back. Relationships are complicated, messy things that require negotiation and compromise and all sorts of unnecessary drama. Exactly. She felt like she was missing something crucial. So, we understand each other? We do. His grey eyes held hers with an intensity that made her stomach flutter, which is why relationships are completely off the table. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by something that felt uncomfortably like disappointment. Good, I'm glad we cleared that up. We're getting married instead. The words hit like a physical blow. Claire stared at him, certain she'd misheard. I'm sorry, what? Married. He said it like he was discussing the weather. Much more straightforward than dating. No relationship uncertainty. No wondering where things are going. No messy emotional complications. Just a simple, practical arrangement between two people who understand each other. You're insane. The words came out as barely a whisper. Probably. His smile turned devastating again. But I'm also right. You felt it the moment you saw me, that sense of belonging, of coming home. You can spend the next hour telling me all the logical reasons why it's impossible, or you can accept that some things are bigger than logic. I don't even know your name. Marcus. He extended his hand, and she found herself taking it without conscious thought. The contact sent heat shooting up her arm, settling in her chest like a second heartbeat. And you're Claire Elizabeth Morrison, 28, owns Morrison Consulting, hasn't dated anyone in 3 years because your ex-fiancé decided 3 weeks before the wedding that you were too independent for marriage. She jerked her hand back, her blood going cold. How could you possibly know that? I make it my business to know things. Something dangerous flickered in his grey eyes, especially when they concern what's mine. I'm not yours. But even as she said it, something deep in her chest was arguing otherwise. Aren't you? Marcus tilted his head, studying her with that predatory focus that made her pulse race. Tell me you don't feel the pull. Tell me you haven't been empty for 3 years, going through the motions of a life instead of actually living one. Tell me you don't look at me and feel like you've finally found what you've been searching for. She couldn't tell him any of those things because they were all true, and that terrified her more than anything had in years. This is crazy, she whispered. Yes. He stepped closer, and she caught that wild scent again, pine and storms and something indefinably him. Completely insane, absolutely impossible. His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. And exactly what we both need. Claire's eyes fluttered closed despite herself. For just a moment she let herself imagine it. Let herself believe that someone could look at her like this, like she was precious, perfect, everything he'd ever wanted, and mean it. Let herself pretend that she was brave enough to trust again. Then reality crashed back in, and she stepped away from his touch. I should go. Her voice shook slightly. This is too much, too fast, too everything. Too real? She nodded, not trusting her voice. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, those storm-grey eyes studying her face like he was memorizing every detail. When he spoke again, his voice was gentle, patient. I'm not going anywhere, Claire. When you're ready to stop running, I'll be here. What makes you think I'll stop running? His smile was soft now, tender in a way that made her chest ache. Because you already have. You're still here, aren't you? And he was right. Despite every instinct screaming at her to flee, despite every logical argument her brain was throwing at her, despite the fact that this entire conversation had been the most terrifying thing she'd experienced in years, she was still here. I need time, she whispered. Take all the time you need. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, placing it gently in her palm. But Claire, when you call, and you will call, remember what I said about relationships. She looked down at the card, seeing his name in elegant script. Marcus Thorne, with a phone number but no business listed. What about them? We're not having one. His voice was warm with amusement and absolute certainty. "We're getting married." And then he was gone, disappearing back into the crowd like he'd never been there at all, leaving Claire standing alone in the hotel lobby, holding a business card and trying to convince herself that the encounter had been some kind of stress-induced hallucination, except for the warmth still radiating from where he'd touched her face, except for the way her heart was still racing, her pulse still echoing the rhythm of his name, except for the absolute certainty, despite every logical objection, that Marcus Thorne had just turned her carefully ordered world completely upside down. And the most terrifying part of all was how much she wanted to let him. The days that followed were a strange kind of torture. Claire threw herself into work with the desperate focus of someone trying to outrun her own thoughts. 3 client presentations, 2 proposal revisions, and a 14-hour day that should have left her exhausted enough to sleep without dreaming of storm-grey eyes and impossible promises. Instead, she found herself staring at the business card she'd tucked into her laptop case, tracing the elegant script of his name with her fingertip. Marcus Thorne. She'd Googled him, of course, found nothing except a single mention in a business journal about private investment consulting, and a photograph that made her pulse race even through her laptop screen. No social media presence, no detailed company information, no digital footprints that would help her understand how he'd known so much about her past. It should have been a red flag, should have sent her running in the opposite direction. Instead, she kept catching herself looking for him. On Wednesday morning, he was in the coffee shop 2 blocks from her office, not approaching, not even acknowledging her presence, just sitting in the corner with a newspaper and a black coffee, wearing jeans and a sweater that made him look less intimidating and somehow more dangerous, like he belonged in her world instead of ruling some distant kingdom she couldn't access. Claire ordered her usual latte and told herself the flutter in her stomach was annoyance, told herself she wasn't disappointed when he didn't look up as she left. Thursday, he was in the parking garage of her building, leaning against a black SUV that screamed expensive, talking on his phone in a language she didn't recognize. The sound of his voice, even from 30 feet away, sent heat shooting through her chest. When he glanced up and caught her staring, his smile was soft, knowing. She'd hurried to her car like a coward. Friday morning brought the worst kind of torture. Her building's elevator, broken between floors, with Marcus Thorne as her only companion for 20 minutes of forced proximity. "This is harassment," she said to the brushed steel doors, refusing to look at him directly. "This is coincidence." His voice was warm with amusement. "Though I have to admit, my luck has been unusually good this week." "Your luck?" Claire pressed the emergency button again, knowing it was pointless. "Right. Are you suggesting I somehow arrange for your elevator to malfunction?" She could hear the smile in his voice. "That would require an impressive level of planning and technical expertise. It would also require being completely insane." She finally turned to face him, immediately regretting the decision. In the small space, his presence was overwhelming. That scent of pine and storms filled her lungs, making her lightheaded. "Which you clearly are." "Probably." Marcus leaned against the back wall, completely relaxed despite being trapped in a metal box 20 stories above the ground. "Though I prefer to think of it as focused." "On what?" "You." The single word hit like a physical touch. Claire's breath caught, and she pressed back against the doors as if she could somehow escape through solid steel. "You don't know me." "I know more than you think." His grey eyes held hers steadily. "I know you work 16-hour days because staying busy means you don't have to think about how empty your apartment feels. I know you haven't eaten a real meal in 3 days because cooking for one person feels like admitting defeat. I know you keep your engagement ring in your jewellery box even though seeing it makes you sick, because throwing it away would mean accepting that you weren't worth fighting for." The words landed like physical blows. Claire's chest tightened, and something dangerously close to tears burned behind her eyes. "Stop." I know, Marcus continued, his voice gentle but relentless, that you tell yourself you're better off alone because being alone is safer than risking someone leaving again. And I know that speech you gave me Monday night. You've been practicing it for 3 years, perfecting it, using it like armor to keep anyone from getting close enough to hurt you. You don't know anything. But her voice came out shaky, broken, giving away every truth he'd just spoken. I know what it's like to lose someone you thought would stay forever. The words were quiet, almost lost in the mechanical hum of the elevator, but they hit Claire like a confession, like an offering. She found herself looking at him, really looking, seeing past the predatory confidence to something deeper, something wounded. Who did you lose? Marcus was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of pain that came from old wounds that never quite healed. My parents, car accident when I was 16. One day I had a family, people who loved me unconditionally, a future mapped out. The next day I had nothing. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. After that, I learned not to trust temporary things. Jobs, friendships, relationships, anything that could be taken away without warning. He studied her face, something vulnerable flickering in his grey eyes. I built walls so high that nothing could reach me, told myself it was strength. Claire's chest ached with recognition. What changed? You. The elevator shuddered, then started moving again. But neither of them moved toward the buttons, neither acknowledged that their forced proximity was ending. Marcus, I'm not asking you to trust me, he said quickly. I know that's impossible right now. I'm not asking you to believe in fairy tales or love at first sight or anything that requires faith you don't have. The elevator dinged softly as it reached her floor. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe, sometimes, the thing we're running from is exactly what we need. The doors slid open, and Claire found herself stepping into the hallway on autopilot. Her legs felt unsteady, her pulse racing from more than just the confined space. Claire. She turned back, even though every instinct told her to keep walking. When you're ready to stop running, Marcus said quietly, call me. What makes you think I'll be ready? His smile was soft, tender in a way that made her chest ache. Because you're stronger than you think you are, and because 3 years is long enough to hide. The doors closed between them, leaving Claire standing alone in the hallway with her heart pounding and her carefully constructed walls feeling paper-thin. That night she lay awake staring at the ceiling of her pristine, silent apartment. The same apartment she'd been so proud of 3 years ago, her sanctuary, her proof that she could build a life without needing anyone else. Now it felt like a mausoleum, beautiful and empty and suffocating. She thought about what Marcus had said, about cooking for one person feeling like defeat, about working 16-hour days to avoid thinking, about keeping the engagement ring like a talisman of her own inadequacy. All of it was true. The worst part was remembering how it had felt to believe him forever. She'd been 25 and stupidly naive, planning a future with someone she thought understood her drive, her ambition, her need to prove herself in a world that didn't take women seriously. David, not the David from Monday night, but the other David, the one who'd promised to love her forever, had seemed proud of her success, had claimed to want a partner, not a dependent. Right up until 3 weeks before their wedding, when he'd sat her down for the talk. I've been thinking about our future, he'd said, looking everywhere but at her face, about what kind of life we want to build together. She'd been excited, thinking he wanted to discuss their honeymoon plans, or maybe the house they'd been looking at. Instead, he'd handed her a list, an actual typed list of adjustments he felt she should consider for their marriage. Work fewer hours, focus on building a family instead of building a career. Let him handle the financial decisions since he had more experience. Consider staying home once children came along, because successful marriages required someone to prioritize the relationship. I love your independence, he'd said, the words feeling like a knife between her ribs. But marriage is about compromise, about becoming a team instead of two individuals. She'd stared at that list, feeling something fundamental crack inside her chest, because she'd heard this speech before, from her mother, from her grandmother, from every woman in her family who'd made themselves smaller to fit into someone else's life, who'd given up pieces of themselves until nothing was left but the shape of other people's expectations. "What if I don't want to make those adjustments?" she'd asked. David's face had gone cold, like he'd been waiting for her to ask that exact question. "Then maybe we want different things. Maybe you're not ready for marriage." He'd left that night, moved out while she was at work, taking his clothes and his books and half their shared belongings. Left the engagement ring on the kitchen counter with a note that said, "I hope you find someone who wants the same things you do." The cruelest part was that she'd actually believed for about 5 minutes that he was right, that her unwillingness to compromise made her selfish, difficult, impossible to love. She'd sat in their empty apartment, her empty apartment, and wondered if she'd chosen career over love, ambition over happiness. Then she'd looked around at the life she'd built, the business she'd created from nothing, the independence she'd fought for, and realised that David hadn't loved her at all. He'd loved the idea of her, the potential for her to become someone else, someone smaller, someone who needed him more than she needed herself. So she built new walls, higher, stronger, more impenetrable than anything she'd had before. Told herself that needing no one was better than needing someone who would leave the moment she refused to shrink. It had worked for 3 years. 3 years of safe, predictable isolation. Until Monday night, when a stranger with storm-grey eyes had looked at her like she was exactly what he'd been searching for. Not a project to be improved or a woman to be managed, but something precious exactly as she was. Claire rolled over, pressing her face into her pillow, because that was the real problem, wasn't it? Not that Marcus was a stranger, or that his pursuit was relentless, or that he'd somehow made her elevator malfunction. The problem was that when he looked at her, she wanted to believe him. Saturday morning brought another encounter, this one in the produce section of her grocery store. Claire was debating between 2 sad-looking bunches of spinach when she caught that familiar scent, pine and storms and something wild that made her pulse kick up despite her best efforts. "The organic section has better options." She didn't turn around. "Of course you're here. I live 3 blocks away." Marcus moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. "Though I have to admit, I was hoping to run into you." "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Because I wanted to apologise." His voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "Yesterday in the elevator, I pushed too hard, said things I had no right to say." Claire finally looked at him, surprised by the genuine regret in his grey eyes. "You were right, though, about all of it." "Being right doesn't give me the right to use your pain against you." Marcus reached past her for a bunch of fresh spinach, the movement bringing him close enough that she could feel his breath against her temple. "I promised myself I wouldn't pressure you, and then I did exactly that." "Why do you care?" The words came out as barely a whisper. "You don't know me. You could have anyone. So why are you here buying groceries and apologising for being honest?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, studying her face like he was trying to memorise every detail. "Because when I look at you, I see someone worth waiting for, someone worth fighting for, someone who's been alone so long she's forgotten what it feels like to be chosen." Claire's breath caught. Marcus. "I'm not going anywhere," he said quietly. "But I'm also not going to keep showing up everywhere you go like some kind of stalker. When you're ready to talk, really talk, you know how to reach me." He placed the spinach gently in her cart, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. The contact sent heat shooting up her arm, and she had to grip the cart handle to keep her hands steady. "What if I'm never ready?" she whispered. Marcus smiled, and it was tender and patient and absolutely certain. "Then I guess I'll have to learn to wait longer than I ever thought possible." He started to turn away, then stopped. "Claire?" "Yeah?" "For what it's worth, that bastard who left you, he was wrong. You're not too independent for love. You're exactly independent enough for the right person." And then he was gone, leaving Claire standing alone in the produce section with tears in her eyes and something dangerously close to hope blooming in her chest. That night she sat on her couch with his business card in her hands and her phone on the coffee table. She must have picked up the phone a dozen times, dialing half his number before losing her nerve and hanging up. Because calling him meant admitting that the walls she'd built weren't as strong as she'd thought. It meant acknowledging that 3 years of careful isolation hadn't healed the wound David had left. It had just taught her to live with the pain. It meant taking the kind of risk she'd sworn she'd never take again. But as she sat there in her silent apartment, surrounded by the beautiful empty life she'd built, Claire realised that maybe some risks were worth taking. Maybe some people were worth the chance of being hurt again. Maybe Marcus Thorne was right, and 3 years was long enough to hide. She reached for her phone. She never made the call. Instead, Claire woke Sunday morning to the sound of her doorbell ringing like someone's life depended on it. She stumbled out of bed in oversized pyjamas and yesterday's mascara, expecting a delivery, or maybe Mrs. Chen from next door with another complaint about the building's heating system. She opened the door to find Marcus standing in her hallway, fully dressed despite the early hour, with an expression she'd never seen before. Dangerous, predatory, like every civilized pretense had been stripped away. "We need to go! Now!" "Excuse me?" Claire blinked, still trying to process his presence outside her apartment. "How did you even get up here? This building has security." "Claire." The urgency in his voice cut through her confusion. "I need you to trust me for the next 5 minutes. Get dressed, grab whatever you can't live without and come with me." "Are you insane?" She started to close the door, but his hand shot out to stop it. The casual strength in that movement, the way he held the heavy door like it weighed nothing, sent an unfamiliar chill down her spine. "I'm not going anywhere with you. I don't even know—" The lights went out. Not just in her apartment. The entire hallway plunged into darkness, emergency lighting flickering on a moment later. In the red glow, Marcus's face looked carved from stone. "Too late," he said quietly. That's when Claire heard them. Footsteps, multiple sets moving up the stairwell with predatory purpose, moving toward her floor. "Marcus!" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "What's happening?" Something that should never have happened. His grey eyes held hers, and she saw something she'd never seen there before. Fear, not for himself, but for her. "Listen to me very carefully. The men coming up those stairs aren't human. They're here for you, and if we don't leave right now, neither of us is walking out of this building alive. Not human." The words should have sounded crazy. Should have sent her running in the opposite direction or reaching for her phone to call the police. Instead, something deep in her chest twisted with recognition, like a part of her had been waiting her entire life for someone to explain why the world had always felt slightly wrong. "What are you talking about?" "I'll explain everything once we're safe." Marcus stepped closer, and she caught that wild scent again, pine and storms and something indefinably other. "But right now, I need you to decide. Trust me, or take your chances with them." The footsteps were closer now. She could hear voices, low and guttural, speaking in a language that made her skin crawl. "This is insane," she whispered. "Yes." Marcus's hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Completely insane. Are you coming with me anyway?" Claire looked into his storm-grey eyes and made the kind of decision that would have terrified her a week ago. The kind of leap of faith she'd sworn she'd never take again. "Give me 2 minutes." She grabbed jeans, a sweater, her laptop bag with her phone and wallet. Marcus waited by the door, every line of his body tense with barely controlled energy. When she emerged from her bedroom, he took her hand without hesitation. "Fire escape? This way." They moved through her apartment toward the window that led to the building's emergency ladder. Marcus opened it with practiced ease, like he'd studied the layout beforehand. which should have been another red flag, but Claire was too focused on the sounds from the hallway, voices getting closer, speaking words that made something primitive in her brain scream danger. "After you." The fire escape was cold metal against her palms, 3 stories of ladder between them and the alley below. Claire climbed down as quickly as she dared, Marcus close behind her. His presence was solid, reassuring, like a wall between her and whatever was hunting them. They reached the ground just as her apartment window exploded outward. Glass rained down into the alley, glittering in the morning sunlight. Claire stared up at the destruction, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The window frame was bent outward, like something had been thrown through it with tremendous force. "Move!" Marcus's hand was on her back, guiding her toward the mouth of the alley. But before they could reach the street, shadows detached themselves from the walls. 3 figures, tall and lean, with movements that were too fluid, too predatory to be entirely human. "Well, well," the one in front spoke with an accent she couldn't place, his voice carrying an undertone that made her teeth ache. "The Alpha King's little pet. She's prettier than I expected." Alpha King. The words hit like a physical blow. Claire turned to stare at Marcus, seeing him clearly for the first time. The way he held himself, the casual authority, the predatory confidence she'd attributed to wealth or arrogance. It wasn't human dominance at all. "You're later." Marcus stepped in front of her, and something fundamental shifted in his posture. The civilized businessman disappeared, replaced by something wild and dangerous and absolutely lethal. "Right now, we deal with them." The man in front laughed, the sound sending ice through Claire's veins. "You think you can protect her? She's not even marked yet, King. Fair game by any Pax law." "She's under my protection." Marcus's voice carried a resonance that seemed to echo off the alley walls. "Touch her, and I'll tear your throat out." Big words for someone so far from his territory. That's when Claire saw them change. It started with their eyes, human brown shifting to predatory yellow. Then their faces elongated, features becoming sharp and angular. Hands lengthened into claws, and when they smiled, she could see teeth designed for tearing flesh. Werewolves. The rational part of her mind tried to reject what she was seeing, but the evidence was right in front of her. The fairy tales were real. The monsters were real. And somehow she was caught in the middle of it. "Claire?" Marcus's voice was calm, steady, like they were discussing the weather instead of facing 3 creatures that could kill them both. "When I tell you to run, you run. Don't look back. Don't try to help. Just get to the street and find people." "I'm not leaving you." "You are." He turned his head just enough to look at her, and what she saw in his eyes took her breath away. Not fear, not anger, but something infinitely tender. "Because if something happens to you, there won't be enough left of this city for anyone to recognize." The threat in those words should have terrified her. Instead, she felt something deep in her chest respond to the fierce protection in his voice, like her soul recognized a truth her mind wasn't ready to accept. "How touching!" The lead wolf took a step closer. "But we didn't come here for speeches, King. We came for her." "Why?" The question slipped out before Claire could stop it. "I don't understand any of this. Why me?" The wolf's yellow eyes fixed on her with predatory interest. "Because you're his mate, little girl, the bond that makes him weak, and because dead mates make excellent warnings to territorial kings who forget their place." Mate. The word hit like lightning, illuminating everything she hadn't understood. The recognition when their eyes first met. The pull she couldn't explain. The way her body responded to his presence. His touch. His voice. Not human attraction at all, but something deeper. Something written into their very DNA. "You're werewolves," she whispered, "among other things." Marcus's voice was grim. "Claire, we really need to have this conversation later." The wolves were moving now, circling with fluid grace. Claire pressed back against the alley wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 against 1, and Marcus wasn't even armed. Then he shifted. It wasn't like the wolf's slow transformation. One moment he was human, the next he was something that stole the breath from her lungs. Larger than the others, silver-grey fur over muscle that spoke of absolute dominance. When he looked back at her, his eyes were the same storm grey she'd fallen for, just infinitely more dangerous. Alpha King. The title made perfect sense now. The fight was brutal and brief. Marcus moved like violence made flesh, every motion precise and deadly. The wolves tried to use their numbers advantage, but they were facing something beyond their experience. Not just an alpha, but royalty. Power that commanded submission from lesser predators. When it was over, 2 of the wolves were dead, and the third was limping away into the maze of city alleys. Marcus stood in the centre of the carnage, breathing hard but uninjured. He shifted back to human form, and Claire had to look away from the fluid beauty of the transformation. When she looked back, he was pulling on the clothes he'd somehow shed without her noticing. "Are you hurt?" His hands were gentle on her face, searching for injuries she didn't have. "I'm fine." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Are you?" "I'm fine." Marcus studied her expression, something vulnerable flickering in his grey eyes. "Claire, You're the Alpha King." The words felt strange on her tongue. Of what? The Northern Territory, everything from the Canadian border to Colorado, east to the Great Lakes. He said it matter-of-factly, like he was discussing his job, instead of revealing that he ruled over territories spanning multiple states. Roughly 300 packs, about 15,000 wolves. 15,000. Claire stared at him, trying to reconcile the man who'd bought groceries yesterday with someone who commanded armies of supernatural predators. "And I'm your mate." "You're my mate." Something in his voice made it sound like a confession. "The other half of my soul, if you believe in that sort of thing. The one person in the world who can calm the wolf, who can make me feel human again. I'm human. You're human." Marcus stepped closer, and she didn't step away. Couldn't step away. Which shouldn't be possible. Wolves mate with wolves, humans mate with humans. Cross-species bonds are so rare they're practically mythical. His hand cupped her face again, thumb tracing her cheekbone with reverent gentleness. "But the moment I saw you, I knew. My wolf knew. You're mine, Claire. You've always been mine." This is crazy. But even as she said it, something deep in her chest was singing with recognition. Like pieces of a puzzle she hadn't known was broken, finally clicking into place. "Yes." Marcus smiled, and it was tender and patient and absolutely certain. "Completely insane. Are you running yet?" Claire looked around the alley, at the evidence of violence that should have sent her screaming into the street. At the man who'd just revealed himself as something out of fairy tales and nightmares. At the life she'd built so carefully, so safely, now shattered beyond recognition. "No," she whispered, "I'm not running." "Why not?" She met his storm-grey eyes, seeing the wolf behind them, seeing the man who'd waited for her with infinite patience, seeing the future she'd never been brave enough to imagine. "Because for the first time in 3 years," she said quietly, "I don't want to." Marcus's smile could have powered the entire city. "Then let's go home." "Home?" "My territory, where I can protect you properly." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining like they belonged together. "Where you can decide if you're brave enough to accept a bond with a monster." Claire squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth spread up her arm and settle in her chest like a second heartbeat. "What if I already have?" The look that crossed Marcus's face was pure joy, fierce and unguarded. "Then we have a lot to talk about." As they walked toward his car, Claire caught sight of herself in a storefront window. Same face, same hair, same body. But something fundamental had changed. She looked like someone who'd stopped running, someone who'd found what she'd been searching for without knowing she was searching. Someone who was brave enough to trust him forever, even when forever came with claws and territorial disputes, and mates who could tear apart city blocks with their bare hands. Marcus? Yeah? When you said you don't do relationships? His laugh was warm, delighted. I meant it. We're skipping straight to the part where you're my queen. Queen. The word should have terrified her, should have sent her running back to her safe, predictable, utterly human life. Instead, it felt like coming home. The Council of Alphas convened 3 days after the attack. Claire stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus's penthouse, watching the city sprawl beneath them while trying to process the crash course in supernatural politics she'd received over the past 72 hours. Pack territories, ancient laws, the delicate balance of power that kept hundreds of werewolf communities from tearing each other apart. And at the centre of it all, the man she was apparently destined to spend eternity with. "You don't have to do this," Marcus said from behind her. She could hear him moving around the room, the restless energy that had been building since they'd received word that the council had been called. "I can handle Blackwood's challenge on my own." "Blackwood?" Claire turned from the window. "The wolves who attacked me work for someone named Blackwood?" "Victor Blackwood, Alpha of the Eastern Territories." Marcus's voice carried the kind of cold fury that made her shiver. "He's been looking for an excuse to challenge my authority for years. Your existence as an unmated human gives him exactly what he needs." Unmated. The word stung, even though she understood the technical distinction. They were bonded, connected by whatever supernatural force had brought them together, but they hadn't completed the mating ritual that would make it official in the eyes of pack law, which apparently made her fair game for anyone who wanted to use her against Marcus. "Explain it to me again," Claire said, settling into the chair across from where Marcus was pacing. "The part about why my being human matters." Marcus stopped moving, his grey eyes meeting hers with an expression she couldn't read. "Human mates are considered unstable, unpredictable. Pack law says that any alpha with a human mate is potentially compromised because humans can't defend themselves and don't understand pack dynamics. So they think you're weak because of me. They think I'm distracted, which, to be fair, I am." His smile was rueful. "For 300 years, I've made decisions based purely on what was best for my territory. Now I have to consider what's best for you, too. It changes everything." 300 years. Claire was still adjusting to the casual way he mentioned his age, the reminder that she was falling for someone who'd been alive since before her great-grandmother was born. It should have bothered her more than it did. "And Blackwood wants to use that against you." "Blackwood wants my territory. The Northern Territories are the largest and most prosperous in North America. If he can prove I'm unfit to rule because of our bond, he can challenge me for control." Marcus resumed his pacing, agitation rolling off him in waves. "The council meeting isn't just about us, Claire. It's about whether 15,000 wolves are going to end up under the control of a power-hungry bastard who sees them as resources instead of people." The weight of that responsibility settled over her like a lead blanket. 15,000 lives hanging in the balance because she'd been brave enough to stop running from love. "What happens at the council meeting?" "Blackwood will present his case. He'll argue that my bond with a human makes me unfit to lead, that I've violated pack law by claiming a mate who can't be properly integrated into the community." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. "Then I'll have the opportunity to respond." "How?" Marcus was quiet for so long that Claire thought he might not answer. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. "By proving that you're not a liability, that our bond makes me stronger, not weaker." "And how do we prove that?" "By completing the mating bond in front of the council." The words came out flat, matter of fact. "By marking you as mine in a way that can't be questioned or challenged." Marking. Claire had read enough paranormal romance novels to have a general idea of what that involved, but the clinical way Marcus said it made her stomach clench with something that wasn't entirely fear. "You make it sound romantic," she said dryly. Marcus stopped pacing, his expression shifting to something vulnerable. "It should be. It should happen when we're both ready, in private, because we choose each other, not because politics demand it. He moved to kneel in front of her chair, taking her hands in his. "I'm sorry, Claire, you didn't ask for any of this." "No," she agreed, "I didn't. I asked for a quiet life where no one could hurt me and nothing unexpected ever happened." She studied his face, seeing the guilt and frustration warring in his grey eyes. "But that's not what I got, and maybe that's not what I needed." "What do you need?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Claire thought about the woman she'd been a week ago, careful, controlled, content with her safe, empty life. Then she thought about the woman she was becoming, someone brave enough to trust in impossible bonds and supernatural destinies. "I need to understand what marking means," she said finally. "All of it. Not just the physical part, but what it changes. What it means for my humanity, my independence, my ability to choose my own future." Marcus squeezed her hands, relief flickering across his features. "Marking doesn't change who you are. It creates a permanent bond between us, something that can't be broken or questioned. You'd be able to feel what I feel, sense my emotions, my location, and I'd be able to do the same with you." "That sounds terrifying." "It can be overwhelming at first," Marcus admitted, "but it also means you'd never be alone again, never doubt whether you're loved, never wonder if I'm going to leave." His thumbs traced across her knuckles with devastating gentleness. "The bond works both ways, Claire. You'd know, always, that you're the most important thing in my world." The promise in his voice made her chest ache with longing. After 3 years of careful isolation, the idea of that kind of connection was both tempting and terrifying. "What about my humanity?" "Unchanged. You'd still be human, still be you. The mark doesn't transform you into something else." Marcus paused. "Though it would extend your lifespan to match mine." 300 years? Longer. I'm not exactly aging at a normal rate." His smile was rueful. "Is that a problem?" Claire considered it. 3 centuries with the same person. Enough time to explore every facet of love, to build something that transcended ordinary human experience. Enough time to forgive mistakes, weather storms, grow into something beautiful and lasting. Enough time to trust. "Ask me tomorrow," she said, "after the council meeting, when we're doing this for us instead of for politics." Marcus's smile could have powered half the city. "You're incredible, you know that." Before Claire could respond, Marcus's phone rang. He glanced at the display and his expression darkened. "It's starting," he said, answering the call. "Yeah." A pause. "How many?" Another pause, longer this time. "We'll be there in 20 minutes." He hung up, and Claire felt her stomach drop at his expression. "What's wrong?" "Blackwood's already here, and he brought half the Eastern Territories with him." Marcus was moving toward his closet, pulling out clothes with military precision. "This isn't just a council challenge anymore, Claire. It's a show of force." "Meaning?" "Meaning he's not planning to accept whatever decision the council makes. If they rule in my favour, he's prepared to take my territory by force." Marcus turned to face her, and what she saw in his eyes made her blood run cold. This is going to be a fight either way. Claire stood, smoothing down the dress Marcus had selected for her earlier, something elegant and formal that supposedly conveyed appropriate Alpha Queen material to supernatural politicians. Now it felt like armour. "Then we'd better make sure you win." The council chambers were located in a converted warehouse downtown, the kind of industrial space that could accommodate a gathering of territorial predators without raising questions from human neighbours. By the time Marcus and Claire arrived, the parking area was filled with expensive cars bearing licence plates from across the continent. "Remember," Marcus said as they walked toward the entrance, "you don't speak unless spoken to directly. Council meetings can get intense, and whatever happens, don't let go of my hand." Claire nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. The weight of dozens of supernatural gazes was already pressing against her skin, and they hadn't even entered the building yet. The warehouse had been transformed into something resembling a courtroom, with raised seating arranged in a circle around a central floor. As they entered, conversation died. Every eye in the room focused on her with predatory interest, and Claire had to fight the urge to hide behind Marcus. "The Northern King," someone announced, "and his human." The dismissive tone made Claire's spine straighten. She'd spent 3 years in corporate boardrooms, full of men who thought she didn't belong there. Supernatural politics might be new territory, but being underestimated wasn't. Marcus led her to a pair of chairs near the centre of the room, his hand warm and steady against hers. As they sat, Claire caught sight of the man who had to be Victor Blackwood. He was everything she'd expected from Marcus's description. Tall, dark, with the kind of cruel beauty that spoke of violence barely held in check. When their eyes met across the room, his smile was all teeth. "Alphas of the Continental Council," Blackwood said, rising from his seat with fluid grace. "We gather tonight to address a matter that threatens the very foundation of our society." His voice carried easily through the space, resonating with an authority that made Claire's skin crawl. This wasn't a man used to being denied anything he wanted. For 3 centuries, Marcus Thorne has led the Northern Territories with strength and wisdom, but recent events have raised questions about his fitness to continue in that role. Blackwood's yellow eyes fixed on Claire with predatory interest. Specifically, his decision to claim a human mate. Murmurs rippled through the assembled alphas. Claire could feel the weight of their judgment, their scepticism, their barely concealed contempt for the weak human who'd somehow captured their king's attention. "Pack law is clear," Blackwood continued. "An alpha's mate must be able to defend herself, must understand pack dynamics, must be capable of producing viable offspring. A human can do none of these things." "That's enough." Marcus's voice cut through Blackwood's speech like a blade. He stood, and something in his posture made every alpha in the room sit up straighter. "You want to challenge my fitness to rule? Then challenge me directly. Leave her out of it." "But she is the issue, isn't she?" Blackwood's smile turned predatory. "Tell me, King, what happens when your enemies discover that all they need to control you is to threaten one fragile human woman? What happens when other packs realise that the mighty Northern Alpha can be brought to his knees by harming someone who can't even defend herself?" The words hit their target. Claire could feel Marcus's rage building, could see the wolf rising behind his storm-grey eyes. Which was exactly what Blackwood wanted, proof that the bond made Marcus unstable. That's when Claire made a decision that would change everything. She stood. "You're absolutely right," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "I can't defend myself against supernatural predators, I don't understand pack politics, and I have no idea whether I can produce viable offspring with a werewolf." She paused, meeting Blackwood's yellow eyes without flinching. "But you're wrong about one thing." "And what's that, little human?" Claire smiled, and it was all teeth. "You assume Marcus is weaker because he has something to protect. But you've obviously never seen what happens when you threaten something an Alpha King values." She turned to Marcus, seeing the love and fierce pride shining in his eyes. "Show them." Marcus's smile was pure wolf. "With pleasure." What happened next would be talked about in pack circles for decades. Marcus didn't just shift, he transformed into something that redefined what it meant to be alpha. Larger than any wolf in the room, silver-grey fur rippling over muscle that spoke of absolute dominance. But it wasn't just his size that silenced the council. It was the power rolling off him in waves, the kind of authority that demanded submission from every predator in the vicinity. The reminder that he wasn't just an alpha, he was royalty. When he looked at Blackwood, his message was clear: touch her and I'll destroy you. "You want to know what my mate makes me?" Marcus's voice carried easily, despite his shifted form. "She makes me someone with everything to lose, which means I'll do anything to protect what's mine." His grey eyes swept the room, meeting the gaze of every alpha present. "Anyone who threatens her threatens me. Anyone who threatens me threatens the peace we've built across these territories." He shifted back to human form, the transformation fluid and beautiful. "So ask yourselves this. Do you really want to find out what I'm capable of when I have something worth fighting for?" The silence that followed was absolute. Even Blackwood seemed diminished, his earlier confidence cracking under the weight of Marcus's display. "The Northern King has made his position clear," the council elder said finally. "Victor Blackwood, do you wish to press your challenge?" For a moment, Claire thought Blackwood might back down. Then his yellow eyes fixed on her again, and she saw something that made her blood run cold. "I invoke the right of combat," Blackwood said quietly, "single combat to the death for control of the Northern Territories." The words landed like a physical blow. Around them, the council erupted in shocked murmurs. Marcus went very still beside her. "Victor," the elder said slowly, "you understand what you're asking for." "I understand perfectly." Blackwood's smile was pure malice. "The Northern King claims his human mate makes him stronger. Let him prove it." Marcus stepped forward, and Claire could feel the violence radiating from him like heat. "Name your terms." "Tomorrow night, neutral ground, no weapons, no pack assistance." Blackwood's eyes glittered with anticipation. "Winner takes all, territory, pack and mate." The last word hit Claire like ice water. She was a prize to be won, a trophy for whoever proved stronger. The realization should have sent her running. Instead, it made her furious. "No," she said clearly. Both alphas turned to stare at her. The entire council fell silent. "I said no." Claire stood, chin lifted in defiance. "I'm not a prize to be won or lost in your testosterone-fueled pissing contest. I'm a person who makes her own choices." "Claire," Marcus started. "No." She turned to face him, seeing the fear in his grey eyes. Fear for her, not for himself. "You want to fight him? Fine, but not for me. Fight for your pack, fight for your territory, fight because he's a power-hungry bastard who doesn't deserve to lead anyone." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. "But I'm yours because I choose to be, not because you won me." Marcus's expression shifted to something that took her breath away. Wonder, love, and fierce pride all tangled together. "Did you hear that, Blackwood?" Marcus's voice carried easily through the silent chamber. "She chooses me, not because of pack law or combat or any of your political games, because she wants to." "Pretty words," Blackwood sneered. "But the challenge stands. Tomorrow night, King. Don't disappoint me." As the council began to disperse, Claire felt Marcus's arms come around her from behind. His breath was warm against her temple as he whispered, "Ready to be a queen." Claire leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. "Are you going to win?" "Yes." The certainty in his voice should have reassured her. Instead, it made her realize exactly how much she had to lose. Because somewhere in the past week, between coffee shop encounters and elevator confessions and supernatural revelations, she'd stopped being afraid of love. Now she was terrified of losing it. The weeks that followed were a strange kind of paradise. Marcus won the combat challenge, of course. Claire had watched from the sidelines as he systematically dismantled Victor Blackwood's attempt to claim the Northern Territories, the fight ending with Blackwood's submission and banishment from the Continental Territories. The council had unanimously reaffirmed Marcus's authority, and more importantly, they'd formally recognised Claire's status as his mate. Now, 3 weeks later, she was learning what it meant to build a life with someone who commanded armies of supernatural predators. "The budget for the Minnesota packs looks good," Claire said, reviewing the financial reports spread across Marcus's desk. "But the Wisconsin territories are showing unusual expenses. Medical costs are up 40% from last quarter." Marcus looked up from his own stack of paperwork, storm-grey eyes amused. "You know you don't have to help with territorial administration, right? Most alpha mates focus on pack social dynamics." Most alpha mates aren't CPAs. Claire highlighted another discrepancy in the Wisconsin reports. Besides, if I'm going to be your queen, I want to understand how this kingdom actually works. The word queen still felt strange on her tongue, but it was getting easier, like trying on clothes that didn't quite fit at first but gradually moulded to her shape. Any theories about Wisconsin? Either someone's skimming from the medical fund, or they're dealing with something that requires a lot of expensive treatment. Claire cross-referenced the expense reports with population data. Given that supernatural healing is supposed to be faster than human medicine, I'm betting on the latter. Marcus set down his papers entirely, giving her his full attention. Explain. The costs started spiking 6 months ago. If it were embezzlement, you'd see gradual increases or random spikes. This is steady, predictable growth in medical expenses across 7 different packs. Claire turned her laptop screen toward him. Someone's sick or injured, something ongoing that normal werewolf healing can't handle. Silver poisoning, Marcus said quietly. Has to be. It's the only thing that doesn't heal normally. Silver poisoning? Weapons, usually. Silver bullets or blades that leave fragments in the wound. The metal prevents normal healing, requires human medical intervention to remove. Marcus's expression darkened. Wisconsin's been having problems with hunters, professional ones. The casual way he said it made Claire's stomach clench. She was still adjusting to the reality that her mate's people faced actual life or death threats from humans who hunted them like animals. What do we do? We. The word slipped out naturally, and Marcus's smile told her he'd noticed. We send support, medical funds, security personnel if they want them. He reached across the desk to take her hand. And we make sure the hunting stops. How? Usually by having a conversation with local law enforcement. Most hunters operate in areas where the authorities either don't care or are actively helping them. Marcus's thumb traced across her knuckles. It's amazing how quickly illegal hunting operations shut down when the right people start asking questions. Claire squeezed his hand, still amazed by how natural it felt to touch him. How right it felt to sit in his study at midnight, working through territorial business like they'd been partners for decades instead of weeks. Is this what our life is going to be like? She asked. Crisis management and financial reports? Some of it. Marcus stood, moving around the desk to perch on the arm of her chair. But not all of it. What do you want it to be like? The question caught her off guard. For 3 years she'd planned her life in careful detail. Career goals, financial targets, professional milestones that would prove her worth to a world that questioned her competence. Now she was being asked to imagine a future that had nothing to do with proving herself and everything to do with building something lasting. I want to matter, she said finally. I want to use my skills to help people, to make a difference in this world I'm still learning about. She looked up at him, seeing the love shining in his grey eyes. I want to build something with you that's bigger than either of us could manage alone. Marcus's hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. You already matter, more than you know. How? 3 packs have requested human liaison positions since word got out about your involvement in territorial finances. Turns out having someone who understands both human and supernatural systems is incredibly valuable. Marcus's smile was soft, proud. You're not just my mate, Claire. You're revolutionizing how we interact with the human world. The words hit like a warm wave, washing away doubts she hadn't even realized she was carrying. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't fighting to prove she belonged somewhere, she just did. Speaking of which, Marcus continued, I have something to show you. He led her out of the study and up the stairs to a part of the penthouse she hadn't explored yet. The hallway was lined with portraits of stern-looking men and women, all bearing the same storm-grey eyes that marked them as Marcus's ancestors. Former northern kings and queens, Marcus explained, noticing her attention. 3 centuries of territorial leadership. Where are the mates? Most alphas didn't have mates, or their mates died young. Supernatural politics used to be even more violent than they are now. Marcus stopped in front of a door at the end of the hall. This used to be my mother's office. He opened the door, and Claire's breath caught. The room was beautiful, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, built-in bookshelves, a massive desk that somehow managed to look both professional and welcoming. But it was the details that made her chest ache with emotion. A state-of-the-art computer setup, financial software already installed and configured, filing systems organised exactly the way she preferred them, even her favourite brand of pens in the desk drawer. "Marcus," her voice came out as barely a whisper, "I know you miss your independence, miss having your own space, your own work." Marcus moved to stand behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. "This is yours, if you want it, your office, your domain, a place to build whatever kind of legacy you want to leave." Claire turned in his arms, seeing the vulnerability in his expression. The fear that she might reject this gift, might decide that even a supernatural kingdom wasn't worth giving up her human life for. "You did all this for me? I'd do anything for you." The words were simple, honest, devastating. "I love you, Claire. Not because pack law says you're my mate, not because some supernatural bond decided we belong together. I love you because you're brilliant and stubborn and brave enough to call out a room full of predators when they're being idiots." The confession hung between them, the first time either of them had said the words out loud. Claire felt something inside her chest crack open, letting in light she'd kept locked away for 3 years. "I love you too," she whispered, "even though you're arrogant and territorial and completely insane." Marcus's laugh was warm, delighted. "Does that mean you're keeping me?" "I'm keeping you." Claire reached up to cup his face, marvelling at the way he leaned into her touch like she was something precious. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "No more life or death political challenges without talking to me first. No more mysterious enemies showing up at my apartment. And if you ever refer to me as your human again, I'm moving back to my empty, safe, boring apartment." "Done." Marcus's hands settled at her waist, pulling her closer. "Anything else?" "Kiss me." The request came out breathless, urgent, carrying 3 weeks of careful restraint and growing desire. Marcus didn't hesitate. His mouth was warm, demanding, tasting like coffee and promises. Claire melted against him, her hands tangling in his hair as he deepened the kiss. This was what she'd been afraid of, this complete loss of control, this desperate need that made her want to give him everything. But instead of terrifying her, it felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "Claire?" "Yeah?" "When you're ready, really ready, not because politics demand it, will you let me mark you?" The question sent heat shooting through her veins. The mating mark, the permanent bond that would link them in ways she was only beginning to understand. A commitment deeper than marriage, more binding than any human ritual. "Ask me again tomorrow," she whispered against his lips. "Why tomorrow?" Claire smiled, feeling brave and reckless and absolutely certain. "Because I want to say yes, and I want to mean it completely." Marcus's answering smile could have powered the entire city. "Tomorrow it is." They spent the rest of the night in her new office, planning the human liaison program that would revolutionize supernatural human relations. They talked about the future they wanted to build, the changes they could make together, the legacy they could leave for future generations. And for the first time in 3 years, Claire fell asleep thinking about forever instead of running away from it. The next morning brought coffee in bed, lazy kisses, and the kind of domestic intimacy she convinced herself she didn't need. Marcus made breakfast while she showered, then they read the news together like a normal couple, instead of a supernatural king and his human mate. "The pack leaders are requesting a formal introduction," Marcus said, scrolling through his messages. "They want to meet their future queen properly." "When?" "This weekend. Nothing formal, just a barbecue at the main pack house. Casual introduction. Let them see that you're not some fragile human who's going to break at the first sign of conflict. Claire considered it. Meeting Marcus's pack, the people who would become her people if she truly committed to this life. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like the next logical step. "Will you be there?" she asked. "Try to keep me away." "Then yes." Claire reached across the table to take his hand. "Let's do this properly." Marcus brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm. Ready to be a queen? Claire thought about the woman she'd been a month ago. Careful, controlled, content with her safe, empty life. Then she thought about the woman she was becoming, someone brave enough to trust in impossible love and supernatural destinies. "Ask me again tonight," she said, smiling at his confusion. "After I've met our pack, after I've seen what kind of queen they need me to be. And then I'll give you my answer." But even as she said it, Claire already knew what that answer would be. She'd known since the moment she'd chosen to trust him instead of running away. Known since she'd stood up to Blackwood and the council, demanding respect instead of accepting dismissal. She was going to say yes, to the mark, to the bond, to the forever he was offering. Because some risks were worth taking, some people were worth trusting, and some love was worth believing in, even when it came with claws and territorial disputes and mates who could tear apart city blocks with their bare hands. Especially then. The pack house was nothing like Claire had expected. She'd imagined something rustic, maybe a little primitive, werewolves living in cabins in the woods like something out of a fantasy novel. Instead, Marcus drove them up to a sprawling modern compound that looked like a cross between a luxury resort and a family retreat centre. Children's laughter echoed from somewhere behind the main building, and the scent of barbecue smoke drifted on the evening breeze. "This is where you grew up?" Claire asked, taking in the beautiful landscaping and well-maintained buildings. "Part of the time?" Marcus parked near the main entrance, where several people were already gathering to greet them. "My parents believed in integration, spending time with the pack, not just ruling from a distance." Claire studied the faces approaching their car, seeing curiosity and wariness in equal measure. These were his people, the ones who would accept or reject her based on the next few hours. The weight of that responsibility settled over her like a familiar burden. Then Marcus's hand found hers, warm and steady. "They're going to love you," he said quietly. "How could they not?" Before Claire could respond, the car doors were opening and they were surrounded by voices and introductions and the overwhelming sensation of being studied by predators who were trying very hard to appear harmless. "Claire, this is Sarah, my beta's mate." Marcus guided her through the crowd with easy familiarity. "Sarah, this is Claire, who somehow agreed to put up with me permanently." Sarah was a petite blonde with shrewd eyes and a warm smile. "The woman who told off Victor Blackwood at the council meeting. I've been dying to meet you." "Word travels fast," Claire said. "Faster than you'd think in pack circles." Sarah's grin widened. "You're already a legend. The human who faced down a room full of alphas and made them respect her." "I just got tired of being talked about like I wasn't there." "Exactly." Sarah linked their arms, leading Claire toward the main building. "Come on, I'll introduce you to the others. Fair warning, they're all dying to interrogate you, but they've been strictly ordered to behave." The next hour passed in a blur of names and faces, all attached to people who were genuinely kind despite their supernatural nature. Pack members who asked about her work, her interests, her thoughts on territorial politics. Children who stared at her with frank curiosity before deciding she was acceptable and returning to their games. It felt like family, chaotic, loud, overwhelming family that somehow made room for everyone. "You're handling this well," said a voice behind her. Claire turned to find an older woman with silver-streaked hair and Marcus's storm-grey eyes. Even before introductions, she knew who this had to be. "You must be Elena, Marcus's aunt." And you must be the woman who's made my nephew happier than I've seen him in 50 years. Elena studied Claire with the kind of careful attention that felt like being measured for something important. Walk with me. They moved away from the crowd, following a path that led to a quiet garden overlooking the valley. In the distance, Claire could see the lights of the city where she'd built her careful, empty life just weeks ago. "He's never brought anyone here before," Elena said without preamble. "In 300 years, you're the first." "I'm honoured. You should be." Eleanor's tone was matter-of-fact, not unkind. "But that's not why I wanted to talk to you." Claire waited, sensing that whatever came next would be important. Marcus lost his parents when he was barely old enough to understand what leadership meant. He spent 3 centuries building walls around his heart, telling himself that duty was enough, that power was a substitute for love. Eleanor turned to face her fully. "You've changed that. The question is whether you're prepared for what that means." "I think so." "Think isn't good enough." Eleanor's voice carried the kind of authority that reminded Claire exactly which family Marcus came from. Being his mate doesn't just mean accepting supernatural politics and pack dynamics. It means accepting that you'll never be completely safe, that there will always be enemies who see you as a weakness to exploit. It means giving up any hope of a normal, quiet life. The words should have sent Claire running, should have triggered every survival instinct she'd developed over years of protecting herself. Instead, they made her think of her empty apartment, her careful routines, her safe, predictable existence that had felt like dying slowly. "I don't want a normal, quiet life," Claire said. "Not any more." Eleanor smiled, and it transformed her entire face. "Good answer. Is that why you brought me out here, to make sure I won't run?" "I brought you out here to tell you that if you hurt him, I'll make sure you regret it." Eleanor's tone was conversational, but there was steel underneath. "And to tell you that if you make him happy, you'll have an ally for life." Claire found herself smiling. "I can live with those terms." "Excellent." Elena glanced back toward the main building, where the sound of laughter and conversation drifted on the evening breeze. "Now, let's get back before Marcus starts worrying that I've scared you away." They returned to find Marcus deep in conversation with several pack members, his expression animated in a way Claire had never seen before. This was him in his element, surrounded by people who'd known him his entire life, people who saw him as family, not just a king. "Having fun?" Claire asked, slipping her hand into his. "Always." Marcus's smile was soft, intimate. "You?" "Getting there." Claire looked around at the faces surrounding them, seeing acceptance starting to replace wariness. "Your pack is pretty amazing." "Our pack," Marcus corrected quietly. The words hit like a promise, like a key turning in a lock she hadn't realized was still closed. Our pack, our people, our future. "Claire," Sarah called from across the patio, "come settle an argument. Marcus claims you're the one who figured out the Wisconsin medical expense situation, but Jake here thinks no human could understand supernatural politics that quickly." Claire felt Marcus tense beside her, ready to defend her against any slight. Instead, she squeezed his hand and smiled. "Actually, Jake's right," she said, moving toward the group. "A human couldn't understand supernatural politics that quickly. Lucky for all of you, I'm a CPA. We're trained to see patterns in financial data that most people miss entirely." The explanation launched into a discussion of territorial budgets, pack resources, and the economic realities of managing supernatural communities. Claire found herself at the centre of it, fielding questions and offering insights with growing confidence. This was what she'd been missing in her careful, isolated life. Not just love, but purpose. Not just acceptance, but the chance to use her skills for something that mattered. "Impressive," Jake said finally. "Maybe having a human queen isn't such a crazy idea after all." "Maybe not," Claire agreed, "though I should warn you, I have very strong opinions about fiscal responsibility and efficient resource allocation." The laughter that followed felt like acceptance, like belonging. As the evening wound down, Claire found herself on the porch swing with Marcus, watching the last of the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. The pack house was quieting around them, families heading home or settling in for the night. "So," Marcus said, his arm warm around her shoulders. "Verdict?" "They're wonderful." Claire curled closer to his warmth, breathing in that familiar scent of pine and storms. "I can see why you love them." "They love you too. Sarah's already planning a territory-wide financial review, and Elena wants to know if you'd be interested in modernizing our record-keeping systems." "And Jake?" "Jake thinks you're terrifying in the best possible way." Marcus pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "He also asked if you have any sisters." Claire laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet evening. "Sorry to disappoint him." "His loss." Marcus was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing patterns on her shoulder. "Claire?" "Yeah?" "Earlier you said to ask you again tonight." The words sent heat shooting through her chest. The mating mark, the permanent bond, the final step that would make their connection unbreakable. "I did say that. Are you ready?" Claire thought about the woman she'd been 4 weeks ago, defensive, isolated, convinced that love was just another way to get hurt. Then she thought about the woman she was now, brave enough to face down supernatural politicians, confident enough to claim her place in a world she was still learning, strong enough to trust in forever. "Yes." The word came out steady, certain. "I'm ready." Marcus's smile could have lit up the entire territory. "Here?" Claire looked around at the pack house, at the place where Marcus had grown up, where his family and his people were settling in for the night, where their children would play someday, where they'd celebrate holidays and weather crises and build the kind of legacy that lasted for centuries. "Here," she agreed, "with our family close by." Marcus stood, extending his hand to help her up. "Then let's make this official." The mating ceremony was nothing like the elaborate ritual Claire had imagined. No crowds, no formal declarations, no supernatural pomp and circumstance, just the two of them in Marcus's childhood bedroom, with moonlight streaming through the windows and love turning the air between them electric. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked one last time, his hands framing her face with reverent gentleness. "I've never been more sure of anything." Claire reached up to trace the line of his jaw, marvelling at the way he leaned into her touch. "Mark me, Marcus. Make me yours." The bite, when it came, was nothing like pain. It was completion, connection, the missing piece of herself sliding into place with perfect precision. Heat exploded through her veins, carrying Marcus's emotions alongside her own. Love, devotion, fierce protectiveness, and underneath it all, the bone-deep satisfaction of coming home. The bond settled into place like it had always been there, waiting for them to be brave enough to claim it. "Mine," Marcus whispered against her throat, his voice rough with emotion. "Yours," Claire agreed, feeling the truth of it in every cell of her body. "Always yours." 2 months later, Claire stood in her new office, reviewing financial reports from 17 different pack territories, while Marcus handled a territorial dispute over video conference. The Wisconsin medical crisis had been resolved, the hunters prosecuted, and the injured pack members were healing properly with supernatural medical support. "The Montana packs want to know if you'd consider developing a standardized accounting system for all the territories," Marcus said, ending his call. "Apparently word of your efficiency has spread." "I'll add it to the list." Claire highlighted another discrepancy, this one in Oregon. "Right after we figure out why the Pacific Northwest territories are buying so much coffee that their beverage budget exceeds their medical expenses. Probably because they're all addicts who can't function without caffeine." "Probably." Claire saved her work and turned to face her mate, still amazed by how natural the word felt now. "How was your day, dear?" Marcus's laugh was warm, delighted. "Domestic bliss suits you." "Does it?" Claire moved around her desk to settle into his arms, breathing in the scent that meant home. "Good, because I plan on keeping you for the next few centuries. Only a few centuries. We'll renegotiate when the time comes. Marcus's kiss was soft, sweet, carrying the promise of forever and the certainty of love that could weather any storm. Outside her office window, the city sprawled beneath them, full of humans going about their daily lives without knowing that supernatural royalty lived among them, that somewhere in a penthouse downtown a former corporate consultant was learning to be a queen, and an alpha king was learning that love was worth any risk. It wasn't the life Claire had planned. It was better. She'd stopped running from love and started running toward it instead, and for the first time in her adult life, she was exactly where she belonged. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments below. I love hearing your thoughts about these stories, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people discover these tales of impossible love and second chances.